So, ladies and gentlemen, I understood that everybody has been working very hard and a lot of good discussions going on. So we are unable to report about 4 times 1.5 hour discussion. So we have asked the leaders of the groups to present in only a few minutes the essence of the discussion and some tips for us to take forward. And the first group was about lessons for the next research framework program, chaired by Professor Rick Loris, who is standing here, and Professor Colm O'Marine. Please, Rick.
Thank you. I want to say that we had a very engaging discussion with the people that were present. That was very interesting. That sometimes drifted off a little bit into what everybody likes. And I would like to summarize the main messages that we have brought forward. So, when we are thinking about a new call that is going to come, or a new framework in which research will be done in the European setting, and thinking back about Horizon 2020 and about FP7 before that, most of us came to the agreement that as a discipline, as a field of RMDs, we should not be afraid of these more general calls, no longer targeting a single disease or a single question. And it seems fairly unlikely, given the success in the evaluations of H2020, that a new framework will come up with very, very specific calls, only aiming at defining, say, the molecular signature of a specific type of chondrocyte. So what has come forward is that totally as a field we should be engaging and should be positive about going in more general competitive calls, on the condition that we are sufficiently interdisciplinary in what we want to do. And that means taking into account many different aspects of the research, going from basic science to implementation, and also being sufficiently innovative. And innovative means looking out of our own windows and engaging with different levels of experts from other fields. That may be experts in specific types of molecular biology, but even so experts in tools and devices that can put things into motion for our patients. So interdisciplinary and innovative should absolutely be probably in the call to further foster excellent science, and we should as a group, as a field, definitely not be afraid of it. We also came up with the probably generally accepted concept that we should use our strengths, and that a new program should be a good one for us if we are able to represent really the whole field. And we are fairly unique as a community and as an organization, if you consider EULAR, by having with us, with the scientists, with the clinicians, also the health professionals and the patients, not only representing primary stakeholders in the process, but also active people in all the types of research that we can do. And this should be an opportunity for us to face challenges put forward in such a program if they are talking about integrated care and better medicine. We also have seen this morning. It's also being emphasized by the Biomed Research Alliance. There is a need for personalized medicine. As you know, many trials will include, if somebody wants to bring a drug to the market, will include a prototype patient, but many of the patients that we see in a clinical setting may not fully correspond with that profile. So there is a need for personalized medicine to better apply the drugs that we already have and to better predict what new drugs are going to do. And one particular area of interest in our field should really be strategic clinical trials. The classical company-sponsored clinical trials will lead us towards market access, to define new indications, but they do not, certainly do not fully respond to the question, how do I have to treat the individual patient with a given disease? And we have good examples in the field, for instance, with strategy trials in rheumatoid arthritis that can be expanded to the other fields, but it's clear that some of these trials do need a lot of funding, do need a lot of money, and it would be really nice to see that the European Union has attention towards this, as this will truly improve patient care. A further topic that we discussed, and that is also from the societal perspective definitely of great importance, is anything that goes from prediction, prevention towards early intervention. We see examples coming up in publications, in studies that are being done in the field, where really we are targeting preclinical phases of disease, and obviously we are increasingly recognizing risk factors, and some of these risk factors may be risk factors that can be avoided. And what we do not know today is something that we may find out in the future. So even for diseases where today we still see no identifiable risk factors except then maybe genetics, there could be in the future, by doing better studies, the identification of things that we can avoid in that context. So that are basically the four main messages. I will also shortly summarize some aspects of the discussion. Collaborative research is obviously important for everybody, and we want to take that forward as a group, probably also in the new framework. Interdisciplinary is really important, and that means not only working with molecular and cell biologists, but also integrating the new partners, as I said, people with devices, people with other technologies, but also other interdisciplinary aspects such as the psychology, such as a true holistic approach. Overall, there is the feeling that, you know, sometimes you may need or you may want a call that is very specific for your field, but there are examples, and the representative of the European Commission made it very clear that, for instance, the Harmonics project on Sjögren's disease was an extremely competitive and funded project in a very broad call, and that the quality of the science that was presented and the quality of the way the project is being executed is what is making the difference. Links to the public health, it's clear that we should target implementation. That also comes back in the recommendation for strategic trials, and that strategic trials go way beyond using traditional or advanced drugs, and also non-pharmacological intervention should really not be neglected, and we should capitalize also on the strength of the representation of the health professionals in our community. Like many fields, this is also identified by the Biomed Research Alliance. We are facing some challenges in further identifying translational scientists that can be clinicians that have experience and ongoing projects in a lab setting, but also the opposite, basic researchers that have an eye open towards the clinic. And obviously better funding chances and support actions for these types of persons can make academic research-oriented careers more attractive. We think that it's important to really represent the whole field, so research led by health professionals is important. They are getting, not slowly, but rapidly towards different levels. They are much more academic than before, and they may need, in this context, to make true societal differences, they may need sufficient and definitely more funding opportunities, because this will likely benefit the whole community in RMD. We have discussed a little bit about review and evaluations. Obviously, any type of questionnaire that you send to a population of which 80% had seen their project rejected is probably a little bit biased towards the negative, but still, the excellence principle is very important, so it's normal that only a small amount of the project is actually funded. However, I think we should emphasize that for many researchers, the success rate at some point when you have to work really hard on a project should be a bit higher. So there could be space to move these things. The percentage of projects going from a stage 1, for instance, to stage 2 could be different. Review feedback is very important for many researchers and is sometimes a bit of a challenge. It is fairly difficult to catch the full discussion within a panel at some point, but reviews on paper by outside reviewers or by panel members are considered quite important, and probably there is still some improvement that can be done there at the EU level, like it is in other scientific panels. And one of the things that has been has come up in the discussion and may be emphasized is that it is really important that you have the appropriate evaluators, and that is of course a give and take thing. That also means that as a community, we need to be able to participate in the review processes, not only to boost our own community's projects, but also to ensure that we provide the quality for our evaluations and for those in related disciplines, so that basically the best projects get recognized by the best reviewers. And definitely it's a community effort in which we should all be included. And obviously, administrative burden remains a little bit of a challenge for many people, and obviously as researchers we would like to spend as much time as we can basically in the lab or seeing the patients in clinical trials and get the administration as limited as possible. That probably summarizes, at least in my view, what we discussed.
I think it was quite an extensive summary, so thank you very much, very clear. Are there any technical questions to Rick? We are not going to have a debate about this, we can do that later, but technical questions? You have been very clear, so thank you very much. And we move forwards with workshop number 2.
Okay.
Challenges in transferring research findings and innovations into clinical practice, shared by Nina Österas and Yvonne van Eyck.
Yes.
And Yvonne is going to present the data.
Okay, thank you. We also had a very fruitful discussion, I think. We had a very important topic to discuss, which was recognized by all participants in our workshop. We had 3 subgroups for the discussion and then a kind of plenary wrap-up, which was complicated because of the time and the actual results. So I hope that I capture everything, but please adjust whenever needed. What we discussed were what are the main barriers for implementation. And one important barrier is the access to the evidence. How to be sure that we capture all the relevant evidence. What about publication bias? Because some of the less spectacular results are not published at all. But also the availability of publications in understandable language. And understandable language is a thing that is partially captured by, for instance, lay summaries of recommendations for patients. But also many health professionals do have a difficulty in a language issue. Not everyone is very confident in talking and reading English or interpreting results. So that's an issue. Another thing, an important thing which will be recognized by everyone, I think, is the funding for implementation. And the implementation is not only focused on drugs, but also other innovations, diagnostic equipment, but also the innovation of care models, for instance. So then the main facilitators for implementation, we considered that good quality of education is a very important issue which was mentioned, and also that bringing together relevant stakeholders from the very beginning of a project. And relevant stakeholders depends a little bit on what the project is, but in the end, of course, we aim to improve patient care, so patients should be included anyway. And then the third main thing was an important issue as well, to identify and promote the use of champions, the leaders, the ones who are recognized as experts or are considered important and who can make noise and a strong voice. So then we formulated some actions for people on different levels. And what we said was for the EU, funding of phase 4 trials for chronic conditions is important, but also what we also considered important is a representation of different European regions, because there are cultural differences between North and South, East and West. It should be recognized. Furthermore, the inclusion of patients already from the very beginning in funding applications, that should be a requirement. That is what we considered. And also that studies, in a way, can be generalized. I mean, many studies are focused on specific groups of people, not above 65 years, only people without any comorbidities, whereas in daily practice, many people are above 65 or do have a lot of comorbidities. So, studies should be focused on that. Furthermore, we said something about what people in the member states could do, or what the member states are responsible for. And once again, I think inclusion of patients in evaluation of funding applications is an important thing that we considered. And furthermore, that there should be a focus on economical consequences, but also other consequences, for instance, regarding quality of care, of not implementing recommendations. then obviously reporting outcomes to monitor implementation is very important. It's an important issue and a requirement to say something about potential consequences as well. And accreditation and education can increase motivation and also, I think, recognition of the quality of the people who are involved in all kind of work and projects. I think that was my report.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Before you go, any technical questions on the report or additions from the people attending the workshop, as you asked? If not, perfect. So, Neil?
Thank you, Hans. So moving on to the third workshop then, which looked at the engagement of patients in research, which was co-chaired by Elsa Mateus, who looks like she's going to give us the feedback now, from the Portuguese League Against Rheumatic Diseases and EULAR, and David Hari from UPATI. So Elsa, please.
Okay, thank you. It was my pleasure to chair this session. It was a workshop, a very fruitful workshop, and we started to discuss and identify a challenge and barriers for the engagement of patients in research and innovation, further than the other ones that were also presented this morning, resulting from the PARE survey that was done. So we have identified that matching expectations and understanding the language can be one of the main barriers. Missing legislation at European and national levels, mainly when it comes to ethics committees and ethics boards. Clear assignment and equal treatment hierarchies. Patients need to be fully involved and treated as equals. And also the lack of governance infrastructure and criteria for involving stakeholders. So after this discussion, we started to think about solutions. So what should policymakers and stakeholders do to further engage patients in research and innovation? So for the EU institutions, it was proposed that they should have a way to finance education for patients in the long run, forming umbrellas and clusters that can bring together different disease areas so we can work further together, and to develop a compulsory framework for the same standards on the cooperation with the public and all stakeholders. Because sometimes we have the feeling that it needs to be compulsory so that at the national level some of the basic principles may be achieved. Also that we need the EU to produce better legislation on all levels. We know that the European Medicines Agency and some other authorities in Europe have good legislation for the involvement of patients, but still we need better legislation at all levels. And also special structural funds for patient engagement. As for the member states and regions, we propose that national policies should reflect the European standards, also having in mind the national differences and particularities. And unless provided smaller funding, at least provide smaller funding at the national level that allowed the patient organizations to promote some research also. We also advocate for the involvement of patients consultants for national authorities. We are aware that it's not done at national levels at every country. And that public money could only be assigned for research depending on the patient involvement as a criteria, kind of like it's done at the EULAR. As for patients' organizations, we suggest that patients' organizations should organize educational courses for patients and researchers that could be offered only for patients, only for research, but also especially bring them together in an educational course, and to create national networks of patient research partners and UPATI platforms, also to create databases on clinical trials, and to develop capacities for engaging research and promote it. And it's also a need to be able to attract public funding so that patients' organizations can be promoters on lead research. As for other stakeholders, we suggest that the university curricula should adapt to engage patients as experts and acknowledge their input. And there should be some best practice sharing and provide multi-stakeholder education on patients' involvement. And the last but not least message is to accept patients as full partners in the process. And that's what we had in our workshop.
Thank you very much, Elsa. It's very clear. Any questions, comments? I was really struck in the workshop by the strength of feeling about, be clear about what the role is that you expect. Help patients to help you, really. So thank you very much, Elsa. That's great. Okay, and the fourth and final workshop report then is going to be the one which looked at public-private partnership in research and innovation, which was co-chaired by Professor Francis Berenbaum from the Pierre and Marie Curie University and Pierre Moulin from IMI. So Francis, please.
Thank you, Neil. So we also had a very, very interesting discussion in the room on the public-private partnership and programs, and we of course started with acknowledging the fact that this is a very, very important opportunity for increasing the funding for research. This of course is an instrument for leverage money. And we've had a very nice introduction by Pierre Moulin on why we need these PPPs. And of course, we have focused the main discussion on the IMI programs, Innovative Medicine Initiative, since it's the main one in which we as rheumatologists or in this field of chronic disease we can be involved in, even if maybe there are other instruments, but maybe we have less awareness of these ones. The main one is the one. So after acknowledging the fact that this is very successful for the medical community, we also have discussed on some challenges. And among the main ones, one is on increasing maybe the mutual understanding between partners. It means that sometimes these programs are seen as giving money to the industry. The EU give money to the industry and that's it. And so even if this is not the case, because as you know, in these programs, the EU gives the same amount of money as the private sector give, but since this money from the industry comes from in-kind, it means that sometimes it can be viewed as not giving the same amount of money. So this is a challenge. The second one is about the communication between stakeholders and the general public, meaning that also for the same reasons, in order to do not have this feeling that this is money coming from the public giving to the private sector, increasing this communication between the different stakeholders of these programs with the general public could help this better understanding between partners and between the stakeholders and the public. The third challenge is about the data set and the fact that this is not only for the private sector, this is also from agencies, from patient organizations, from many stakeholders, that we really need an openness of the data sets in order to increase our knowledge and, of course, then to having better deliveries. So this is also a very, very important point and a big challenge. We have already heard about the patient involvement in this day, and also for the PPPs, this is very important to increase the involvement of the role of the patient throughout the process, to include the patient at the different steps from the beginning of these programs. So this is not only for the public programs, but also for the PPPs, even if it is usually already the case for many, many programs. And finally, we discussed on how a topic is chosen. Pierre has chosen in the presentation how the topics are chosen, but there was a discussion about how does it come from? Does it come mainly from the FPR, which are the private companies? And in fact, this is the aim of these projects of the PPPs and for the IMI, that it should come first from the industry, but with then a specific interest for the public part. So this is the way. But it's also a challenge, because it's also be considered that even also for these programs, the public partner should also maybe have an input maybe before. So this has been a very nice, interesting discussion. So what are the potential actions very rapidly at the EU levels? At the EU level, to increase the patient involvement on the policies, but there was also a discussion that if the policies are too strict, also from the industry part, there could be then a limitation to be involved in this program. So we should find the best balance in order to have an increased patient involvement in the policies. Of course, we need more money for research. This is true for the public programs, but it's also true for the PPPs, even if we already know that from the beginning of IMI 1 plus IMI 2, we are at more than 5 billion euros, so it's a huge amount of money, but we always need more. And so that's the reason why we also suggest at the EU level that there is a continued IMI funding for the FP9, since it is a very, very successful program. Concerning the data sharing, you will see that even at the EU level, but also at the member state level, we really need to increase the regulation in order to open the data. This is really what we need, and so there are some. We had also some discussion about the fact that sometimes the policies are very different from the EU level, but then at the national level, you will not have the opening of the data set. So this is very important. Just an example in France with Sécurité Sociale, we would like to have this openness of the data set. It's very, very complicated, and I know that it's true also for many, many regions and states. For the universities and the research centers, we discussed on the fact that sometimes, and this is true also for the industry, you see on the line below, that the focus on each part is not well known, so we really need to increase the awareness, but sometimes it could lead to a better discussion in each part at the industry level and also at the university levels, that what is the focus of the research we would like to deliver, and that then could help to build a program in an IMI level, for example. And finally, a better communication of the research results could be very helpful, not only for the assessment of the IMI program, because then if you have a better assessment of the programs and what they have delivered, then it's easier to find money at the EU level, but also the fact that if you do that, you will increase the understanding of what is an IMI program, and so to involve more people into this IMI program. And finally, concerning the patient organization, there are also a need for better communication of the research results coming from these programs. And the objective is also to encourage a stronger role in research and innovation of these patient organizations, as we have already heard before, and also so in the PPP's program. And finally, the objective for the new programs would be to include more stakeholders, because there are an evolution of how to deal with the research in health medicine, and so to include more other stakeholders like digital or food and nutrition sectors. So these are what we have discussed during this very, very nice workshop.
Thank you, Francis. Great. And are there any questions on any of that? I'm sure some of these issues will recur in the rest of the programme. Thank you, Francis. Thank you.